You are listening to Anesua Works. Spelled Entry 2. 4 days of relentless searching was carried out by a volunteer search party in a bid to find Sarah, the lost girl from Chirewa. The 6 men wielded torches and had carried pouches of food and water because they would not be returning for a few days. The team was led by Asonan, the great-grand-uncle of Eria, who grew to be a leader much like him. The group fanned out in a horizontal file, and as they inched forward, they called out for Sarah and marked the trees they passed with their machetes. For 6 days, they ventured deeper than anyone they knew had. They crossed 3 rivers they knew and went round a mountain they didn't, but they pushed on, determined to return with good news for a grieving mother. Eventually, the men came to another river they had never seen before. They named it Oti. It was larger than all 3 they had crossed combined, and the men instantaneously knew they would not be able to cross it. They also knew it meant they would not find Sarah. They sank into the dirt, and a few of them cried out of despair. For Sarah's mother, the news was a nightmare, but until she died, she hoped her child would walk into her compound one day. Decades passed, and when a frail old lady died on the sunniest day many had seen in a long time, everyone with the memory of the little girl that disappeared was deceased. Sarah was no more than a forgotten sad story. In all that time, Yaruda stayed tucked away in her cave, which lay about 50 kilometers west from the river Oti. She had not aged a day, yet it had been 70 years since she took over Sarah's body. Yaruda had gone through several spell books and even more ancient texts about the spirits. When she came across a language she did not recognize, Farat was right there to grant her instant knowledge of it. Yaruda was preparing a nasty trap for the other spirits. In the driest month of the year, the people of Chirewa held a feast and festival in honor of the gods. The people would set a gigantic fire and bring whatever offering they had before it. They would sing, make merry, and say prayers to the gods. They would ask for bountiful harvests, fertility for their women, wisdom for their leaders, husbands and children, and for torrents of rain all year. After all prayers were said, the priest, Iniwa, and his disciples would sanctify the offerings before tossing them in the fire. The fire being fed would cause the flames to roar, and the crowd would follow with cheers. There would be singing, dancing, and feasting till the fire completely died out. At that point, the villagers would approach the ashes solemnly as the priest blessed them by making a tiny incision on their forehead and going over it with some ash. The villagers believed it brought tremendous favor from the gods and warded off evil spirits. For this occasion, all the gods gathered in one place, a perfect opportunity for Yaruda to exact swift revenge. She was on a timeline to figure out how to get back into the realm. In her studies, Yaruda came across a shadowy book. She had been led to it by Farat, and it was clear the book was bursting with negative energy just by glancing at it. The book was the work of a man who had entered into a deal much like the one she had. Entry was born over 200 years before Sarah's mother had been born. He grew obsessed with knowledge of the supernatural when as a young man he chanced upon the goddess of plants, Abba. She was lounging on a bunch of crawling plants draped together like a hammock. The plants around her seemed to be alive and excited by her presence. The entire forest was still, but around her it was windy. The goddess had not a hair out of place. Entry ducked behind a thick bush when the goddess looked his way, but she had seen him already. He was certain she would kill him, but was pleasantly surprised to find the goddess was in awe of him also. She had watched humans from her seat in the realms, but had never seen one so close. Entry was paralyzed with fear. He wanted to run, but the bright aura and stunning face Abba wielded held him in place. She glided over to the young man and stared at him for several minutes. With each passing second, Entry felt himself get calmer and calmer. The goddess's skin was the color of mahogany. Her hair brushed the earth, and her clothes were made from flowers and tree bark. And he was a very striking young man. He was tall and lean, and had a good head of hair. He loved to play music and was actually on a hunt for Hyde to make an instrument when he stumbled across Abba. The goddess and the young man formed a friendship. Entry would sense Abba most Thursdays, and he would sprint all the way to the clearing where they met. Entry was also a curious man. As a boy, he had climbed into the pen of a bull because he was intrigued by the size of its horns. The bull meant to kill the intrusive boy, but he was gifted with speed and ran circles around the poor creature. He found the entire thing hilarious, but his mother nearly died of a heart attack, and his father, a wealthy blacksmith, almost beat him to death for it. In time, the bond between the two beings grew more personal. They could not physically be together since they were God and man, but Entry would sing to her and her to him. They would rest under the shade of a grand tree and talk for hours. Before long, Entry's curiosity drifted to the darker side of things. He would stare at the roof of his mud hut and wonder how the gods had such power. He wondered what the extent of their powers was, and if anything could take it away. His heart skipped a beat when he briefly imagined himself as a god. The thought alone was almost too strong to handle. He thought more about what their weaknesses could be. He also thought about asking Abba, but he was certain she would not just hand him that information. He decided to risk his life to find out. One late Thursday afternoon, the pair nestled close to each other on a bed of lush bamboo leaves and straw. Entry's heart pounded as he thought of a way to set his plan into motion.
I brought you a gift, goddess,
Entry said, a hide of strong wine in hand.
What is it? Abba asked.
In this bag is one of the strongest substances mankind has ever created. It's called wine,
Entry explained. The goddess was instantly intrigued. He offered her the wine, unsure if it would have any effect on her. The goddess drank till the hide was empty, and when she was done, she let out a thunderous laugh. Entry knew his plan was working. Abba was drunk and grew very talkative, just as Entry had hoped. He seized the chance to grill Abba.
Where do you go from here?
Entry asked.
To the realm, of course,
Abba replied.
but not before I make sure my children are okay.
She added, looking up lovingly at the canopy of trees above them.
You are very loving, Abba, and you give us food to eat.
Entry said.
It's my job. Vanessa allowed my spirits to form, so the earth recreated would never lose that green and blue hue we love to see from up there.
Abba said.
The realm is above us?
Entry dared.
Yes, it lies above the highest sky. No man can go there on their own, and if they ever do, they will never leave there alive.
Is it a dangerous place?
Entry asked.
Not at all. It's the most peaceful of worlds. Anything or anyone who threatens to change that is sent away by my lord.
Abba explained.
Can you take me there?
Entry asked. There was such a rush of adrenaline coursing through him that he felt faint.
No,
Came the answer.
not unless you have a very rare spell.
Entry could not believe his luck. He was dying to ask more questions, but afraid to push his luck. He held his tongue and resolved to ask more on their next meeting. The very next Thursday, Entry sprinted to the clearing with a feeling of fear and excitement. Over his shoulder hung a large bag of wine. On this occasion, he managed to find out the spell that could get one into the realm of the gods was no ordinary spell. One would have to make an exchange of their soul for it, and even then, they would not leave alive. Abba told him the ancient spell was basically the reverse of the creation event. The spell was in a language no man could decipher, and it was hidden in a forgotten temple. The spell, together with a specific charm to be hidden deep in the earth, was the combination of doom. At night, alone in his hut, Entry would scribble all he had learnt in a book made of hide and bound by twine. The cunning man continued to siphon information from the tipsy goddess. Soon, he had amassed a wealth of knowledge about the gods that was not the product of myths nor legend. He had irrefutable and damaging information on the most powerful of creatures. The only thing left was the location of the spell, and he would stop at nothing to figure it out.